trivia question.
Awesome.
The trivia question is in the...
Well, Ryan, why don't you announce that for people?
Sure.
Because we've got some folks in the audience right now.
So if you're trickling in here, we went ahead and put the traditional trivia question in the chat. So if you want to look, got any thoughts? You don't cheat by going to Google and just like sorting it out. It's all good. So.
Okay, what did we say? What Iowa city is closest to a meteorite collision site? Hint, the collision was 74 million years ago.
Yeah, nobody was living there at the time.
So everybody put your answers in the chat. Sometimes when you guys hop on and join us, I accidentally have the chat disabled, but I've enabled that so you can tell us where you're joining us from in the chat. Try to answer the trivia question, just whatever you have to share today. I'm going to get us live on Facebook.
All righty. Looks like we're live now.
Okay, I still see some folks are trickling in. So as you all are going to see today, our host looks a little different. We have Ryan Marquardt here. He's joining us. He's joined us before as our host when Aaron has other commitments. We're so excited that Ryan can join us today as our vice president and host. So it's awesome to have a new face on.
Sort of new, you know. So yeah, I'm Ryan Marquardt.
Yes,
I farm in Madison County, and I'm vice president of Iowa Farmers Union. And we're here today with Stephanie BadSoldier Snow to talk about blood quantum and tribal enrollment. I think it's a topic that a lot of people haven't thought about, but has a massive impact on our Native tribal members and their descendants. So I'm excited to delve into that today. But I think we have a few announcements that we need to just knock out of the way first. So Christina,
yes.
do you want to get those out of the way?
Yes, yeah, I'll jump in. So my most very important announcement is that we want to see you in Storm Lake on December 1st and 2nd. So we sincerely hope that you join us. We're so excited for the annual convention that's coming up. Yes, I am partial, but it is going to be, I think, a really exceptional convention. We were just speaking with our authors the other day for our author panel, Chris Jones, Angela Tedesco. We're so excited about that. Paul Durenberger. Angela is the author of Finding Turtle Farm. I know a lot of you are familiar with that book. Chris has a recent book, and so does Paul. So they will be in person December 1st that evening for our fundraiser. You can ask some questions about their book, get a copy, get it signed before we jump into our full convention lineup the next day. So I will put our registration info in the chat. If you register before or by November 20th, you'll get a little early bird discount. Also, people should know that our annual fundraiser starts on Giving Tuesday, which is November 28th. Our goal this year is $30,000 in 30 days. So we try to amp it up and challenge ourselves a little bit every year. You will be getting emails, posts, that kind of thing on ways you can be involved in helping us reach our goal. So Ryan, that's all I have if you want to.
Oh, okay, awesome. But with that, I want to give Stephanie as much time as humanly possible to like explore this topic and share it with you. So I'm going to hand this off to her, and she's going to get us rolling.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, both Christina and Ryan, for having me today, and for Tommy, actually, who I don't know if he's on, but for inviting me to come and speak about this. So my name is Stephanie BadSoldier Snow. So I just introduced myself in the traditional way, which is Meskwaki language, and I had mentioned my name, which is Ashita. Won't get into all of the sort of definition of that because we have limited time. But I'm a Swan Clan member of the Meskwaki Nation. And if you had read my introduction, the bio that was sent out with the flyer, you'll see that I am an enrolled tribal member of the HoChunk Nation in Wisconsin. And my husband and I were just discussing this yesterday, but kind of trying to break down my own blood quantum, which we'll talk about today, and how that is never going to be fully accurate. But I'm basically comes down to the simplest form is that I am half Meskwaki, half HoChunk, but I also have Lakota and Umohon background. So I'm going to share my screen so that blood quantum, I called this the conundrum of blood quantum because it really does become very complicated. It seems simple, but it becomes problematic for Native people. And so it is definitely a conundrum for us. So what the basic information that you need to know is that there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and there are, I think, around 70 or so state recognized tribes. And the basis of that recognition is the relationship that tribes have with either the state or the federal government, and in the with treaties, sorry. And the treaties have certain things that were sort of promised to us, and one of those is protection for Indians. I put that in quotes because I don't necessarily agree with the terminology, but still for legal purposes, we use American Indian. So protection for us from attacks on our lands. We're supposed to be guaranteed health care, and we can get into that. But again, that's another topic, another offshoot that could go for quite a while. Same thing with education. So we are considered to be sovereign nations, but I would say it's more along the lines of self-determination, which was passed in 1968. That we are considered to be a nation within a nation, and yet we have certain there are certain things going back to some of the things like healthcare and education, food, those kind of things, other grant opportunities and funds that really ultimately don't make us fully sovereign. So to me, it's more like self-determination. And then of course, religious freedom. We have the right to practice our life ways without any interference. And just imagine that, I mean, this is 40 years ago, almost 50, it's not very long ago that we were actually granted that freedom. And then of course, protection of our hunting, fishing, land rights, water rights, those come into play as well. And then jurisdiction over our own land. So I can say that Meskwaki we have a police department, and we have our own court, tribal court. So this is where things start to get a little fuzzy. In order for the federal government to be able to say, well, okay, we've created these treaties with these groups of people, well, who is it that we're indebted to? So the idea is that they are sort of giving back for taking lands and resources and things in a way. And so they want to know, how are we responsible, and who are we responsible to, right? And so you have to imagine also there are 574 tribes, so they each have those treaties in place for them. Federal recognition establishes a political and legal relationship between us and the federal government. And that is definitely a resource there that you can take a look at if you'd like to. I'm going to move on to the next slide, however, so hopefully you can grab that information. In the late 1800s and 1890s, all the way into about 1930s or so, we were experiencing census for the first census on a lot of tribal lands. And we had ours in the 1890s, and then they came back and did a recount in like 1920 or so on the Meskwaki Settlement. And what they did for simplicity's sake was, so at the time, I can tell you that we had already gone through plenty of war, sickness, things like that that had caused our people to die off quite significantly. And we were down to around 300 people. So just imagine that devastation on our people. So we had a lot of other tribal groups that were living with us, or we were living near. And so when they came and did the census, they actually counted everyone that was there. And again, for simplicity's sake, they just said, okay, everyone here that we are listing on this paper are all going to be 100% Meskwaki and nothing else. And at that time, we were not doing any such thing. We had a cultural way that allowed for us to adopt or take in people from other groups. And if they were interested in living with us and got along well with us, then we just asked that they followed our system of life and our belief system as well, and speak our language, and then they just became Meskwaki. So that's kind of how and of course we had to marry out and things like that to try to build up our population again. So right in the center of that picture, I need to point out a couple of people on this photo, but the man in the very center is my great grandfather. He was the last hereditary chief, that is Washitoni. And standing just behind him, who has the suit, that was Joseph Tesson, and that's my great grandfather as well. And he was our tribal interpreter, so he spoke 5 different languages. And these were the men who were kind of doing all of the negotiating. Number one, for us to have land here in Iowa, but also other political things, and making sure that the relationship between us and the state, and then us and the federal government was going actually in our direction. A lot of times they were very good at advocating for the people. So blood quantum, I just want you to see this, but most tribes will so I need to back up just a little bit, but the federal government said, when we count all of you, then you are all starting at a 4/4 blood degree. And that was to be basically know that they were responsible to Native people. And that was the way they came up with, to kind of make sure that they were giving to Native people as decreed by the treaties. So the only thing that happened was, so they established this, and yet they gave that to tribes. They kind of plopped it in our laps and said, okay, you from here on out, tell us how it is that you're going to establish that these people are definitely of your tribe, right? So they asked that a blood quantum be used for that. I think one of the other experiences that one of the other groups in this country who has experienced something similar is probably our Black community and the 1 drop rule. We've heard of that before. So, but this goes the other direction, and this is kind of making sure that they are sort of, and I say sort of because it's never really, it's never really without issues. We're not just getting things for free, so that needs to be understood. But in that relationship, who are they having the relationship with? And so again, they plopped that into our laps and said, you come up with your tribal enrollment policy to say, yes, this person is definitely a tribal member of this group, and so therefore they will be recognized, and that's where the federal recognition comes in. It needs to be understood that this is basically a pedigree, right? The federal government actually expected us to assimilate far quicker than we have, and they expected that this would be something of the past, and that we would probably marry non-native people, and that they would no longer have this relationship or this responsibility to native people. That was the hope. And it's actually, it's to be blatantly honest, it's actually quite a insidious thing to do. Really hoping that the native people would assimilate and then just not want to be native anymore, and their blood degree would fade away, that kind of thing. So in some cases it is, and so that's why you have this image here. I can tell you that there is one tribe that I know of that does not have a limit to their blood degree, but every other tribe has been expected to have that. And so there are places where you have to be at least 1/8, whatever that tribe is, to be enrolled as a tribal member and be federally recognized. And there is the Cherokee. I had and I know this because I had a former director who actually was 1/128th. I don't know how many generations that is, but Cherokee, and she was tribally enrolled. And she had 2 sons, and she tribally enrolled them as well, and they were 256, if I did that math right. So you see how that becomes kind of a loss of, you might not be losing culture at that point, but you definitely are losing your native DNA. So that's where this starts to become very problematic for native people, and kind of how they start to look at each other, maybe view themselves. So we need to understand that blood quantum and the certified degree of Indian blood, which is another component of this. If you're not tribally enrolled, all of us have a certified degree of Indian blood, if we're a descendant of a tribe. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a tribal member, due to tribal government's eligibility requirements to be an enrolled member. So it's important to understand that this is really an act of genocide, and it's the hope behind that was assimilation. And yet we have actually kind of gone the other way in a lot of places, and really see it as a way to survive, and it's a way to revitalize our people. And we're looking to kind of solve the problem of blood quantum in some places where they either have open enrollment. So as long as you can prove that you're a descendant of someone who was on the original rolls, census rolls, then you can be enrolled. Or some tribes are going to where they're kind of wiping the slate clean and saying everyone is now fourth, whatever tribe, and they're kind of going from that, and then the countdown kind of happens from there. So I know that's been happening here recently, but we're always looking to kind of revitalize our numbers and our culture and our language, those kind of things. So this is part of it. So I've been described as someone who is a political HoChunk and a cultural Meskwaki. My blood degree is a little bit complicated. So I am tribally enrolled with the HoChunk Nation in Wisconsin, but I am also HoChunk from the Winnebago group in Nebraska. And there I also have some Umohon blood. You've probably heard the word Omaha, and that's the people. And then I am also what we've tracked down to be Rosebud Lakota. I always knew I was Lakota, but we didn't have all of our documentation for that until fairly recently, and then have found some relatives in Wagner, South Dakota. So, and my parents, so this is the interesting part. I should probably back up until my great grandmother, who was one of the first people counted on probably the second census rolls that we have here on the Meskwaki Settlement. And she had children from 2 husbands. Her first husband died, and they were each HoChunk men. But because the tribe was trying to, again, build up their population, they allowed her children to be enrolled as Meskwaki people, and they were then counted as 4/4 Meskwaki, regardless of the fact that their fathers were actually HoChunk. And then, so my mother would be mostly HoChunk, just maybe about 1/4 Meskwaki. My father, who did not claim me, was Meskwaki and Lakota and some other things. And that created this interesting thing for myself as an individual. And I always say that I can't really speak for anyone else. And even though we're not supposed to say like me, we're not supposed to really talk about ourselves as individuals. I see where my story is very parallel to a lot of other people's. This has happened. I'm not the only person who this has happened to. I'm not unique in that way. And so I was not eligible to be enrolled as a Meskwaki person because of my father's decision to not claim me as his child. And when I became an adult, I decided to look into getting myself enrolled based on my lineage. And so that was possible for me with the HoChunk in Wisconsin. They counted all of my tribal blood. And then when it came time, and I had children myself, they counted all of my children's blood as well, because they're also Yaqui and Nawa. And so it helped their numbers. And then as far as the tribe is concerned, but it also helps my children to be recognized in that way as well. The interesting thing is that it's not necessarily something that I really truly believe in, but I wanted to do because ultimately I felt for me it was important to say, I don't really want the federal government to sort of shirk their responsibilities to us. And so I wanted to be counted, and I wanted my children to be counted. Now that becomes, again, there are issues with that in the background and in your daily life among other Native people. I'm not sure if maybe this, oh, sorry. Well, I guess that's not going to show the video that I had linked to this, but my daughter talks about that a little bit and how that affected her in school. And of course it did me as well. I was actually called white girl in by Native people, and then I was ostracized by non-Native people in school because I'm obviously not white. And my daughter is lighter skinned than I am, and people questioned her at school and asking her, are you enrolled? And she said she she chose to not talk about this topic with anyone unless they explicitly would ask her about it. And even then, she was sort of guarded about how much she told, where she was enrolled, how she got enrolled, things like that. She just didn't want to talk about that because there is a stigma that goes along with that. Something that we need to face as Native people is the act of lateral oppression. We see a lot of this happening when we know someone has a traditional name, they're living a traditional cultural life, and they are dedicated to their community, and yet because they're not enrolled, they're seen as different or even less than by other Native people who are enrolled. And then you have this other issue of those who are not necessarily culturally involved, who are tribally enrolled. And so that also becomes with the stigma in there. So it's not an easy topic to talk about. And it's also, it's super complicated, whether it seems very easy to sort of describe, and it's really not. So I think I will kind of end there, and hopefully we'll get to some questions that help to clarify a little bit more. And I hope I did an okay job with.
No, I think you did a great job. I mean, it's an interesting exploration of like the struggle for identity and like how you perceive it, how others perceive it, and how the government perceives it and interacts with you, and how even tribal governments interact with it. So
right.
I appreciate that journey.
I will say, I will add this one comment. My husband usually pulls out his tribal ID to help explain this situation and he typically says, on this card, I am listed as whatever that fraction is, and I'm Oglala Lakota, right? And he says the only groups that are made to do this in this country are horses, dogs, and Native Americans.
Right.
So that's really important to know.
No, yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. And Christina put a good note in the chat that that you're, I guess, set to speak at the convention on December 2nd.
Right.
So I think we're looking forward to that.
I am too.
We had one quick question. We'll try to slip it in there. And just asking about the rights of women versus men in the Meskwaki settlement. How does that? Can you do they have kind of the same rights as tribal rights?
I'm a little uncomfortable covering that.
That's fine. That's
so
okay.
We are a patrilineal and patriarchal society, and so it does look a little bit different for men versus women.
Okay.
And that's typically around so some political things, and then I would say that probably the biggest the area that is most stark is probably housing, but there are plenty of women who also get homes, and so the tribe owns everything together, right, as a collective. And everyone receives revenue from, a little bit of revenue from businesses or the way that, so we have a convenience store, we have a casino, we have Red Earth Gardens, we have, so everyone receives something from that.
Yeah, didn't want to open a can of worms, but I figured we'd respect their questions. So.
Thank you. Yeah.
But no, appreciate you coming today, Stephanie. I appreciate you sharing this with us. I'm looking forward to your presentation at the annual conference. So thank you for being here today. I did want to make one note that the trivia question we asked about meteorite impact in Iowa, what city was close to that? And that is Mason, Iowa, which is basically right between Fort Dodge and Storm Lake being the location of our annual conference here coming up on December 1st and 2nd. Christina will glower at me if I got those dates wrong, but I think they're right. So with that, I think we have reached our allotted time. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. Thank you for Christina for helping us run this thing. And thank you all for joining us today. And we hope to see you at the annual conference coming up soon. And don't forget to support IAFU during our annual fundraiser starting Tuesday, November 28th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stephanie, we're so excited to have you at convention. I can't believe I forgot that earlier. That's the most important announcement of the discussion. So
Yeah,
everyone,
you forward to that myself. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thanks, everyone.